it's a chess game. And so we need to remove the players from the board, and we need to enable those that are still out there to continue to move forward.
Even HOA rules will change from time to time. So what this does is it makes sure that everyone in our state has the same right to build an ADU on their property per the provisions. With that, I'd appreciate your aye vote, and debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before you is, shall Senate Bill 1354 as amended pass the Senate? The Senate Secretary will call the roll.
Adams, Anthony, Byrne.
60 seconds, please.
60
Mr.
seconds,
President.
Senator Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be a no on this one. I don't believe this is the silver bullet. I don't believe this is going to help with affordability. If we're looking for the silver bullet on affordability, senators, it's the price of the land. And until we fix the price of the land through some type of means, whether it's incentives or tax breaks, whatever the case may be, affordability will still be an issue, regardless of the ideas that we're voting on, and regardless if we support them or not. Cities are already able they are already allow for ADUs, and so for that purpose, I vote no.
Senator Byrne votes no.
Bierke, Blaylock, Burtonshaw, Carlson, Cook, Van Hartog, Foreman, Galloway, Grow, Guthrie, Harris, Hart, Kaiser, Cole, Lakey, Lenny, Lind, Nichols, Okonowitz, Robbie, Ricks, Ruckty, Semora, Shippey, Taylor, Taves, Van Orden, King, Wintrow, Woodward, Cito, Seiderveld, Anthony, Ricks, Taves,
The vote count shows 25 in favor with 10 against, a majority having voted in the affirmative. Senate Bill 1354 as amended.
All right, folks. Well, there you have a little Senate action here on a Friday morning. It is 10:30 in the north, 11:30 in the south. Welcome to Idaho Signal. My name is Matt Edwards, and it is Friday. I'm so excited we're here at the end of the week. This has been a long week, a long, grueling week. Lots of disappointment happening this session in Idaho politics. Make no bones about it. You know, last year was last session was a great session. There was a lot of great bills getting through, but this one has been a lot tougher. The empire strikes back, so to speak. But that doesn't necessarily take away from all the good things that happened last year, because they're all being implemented this year. You know, the parental choice tax credit is rolling along. You have the anti-SLAPP legislation that passed, that's now law in Idaho. All of the different things that happened during the Medical Freedom Act and so forth. So a lot of good things to be happy about here in Idaho, but there's still long fights ahead, because we see these immigration bills being stymied, being sent to early graves in the Senate, and it's really frustrating. But we've got kind of a mishmash of things to cover today on the on this Friday show. So, but we'll keep tabs on what's going on in the Senate and in the House. And I'm going to ask the producers, let's send over some screenshots of some votes that we need to pay attention to, and make sure we keep everybody up to speed. Okay, let's take a look at this first. Yesterday, I wanted to show this to you yesterday, but we didn't have the clip ready in time. But we have it for today. So just to set up, this is about the parental choice tax credit. So the application, if you wanted to apply for the school choice tax credit, That window has closed. March 15th, I believe, was the final day to apply. And just to reiterate, if you have a child or a student that you are taking out of or already have out of public school, and you would like to use the funding that would have been used for your child in public school to use it how you see fit, the window for that was the beginning of the year to apply up until March 15th to apply for a up to $5,000 tax credit to go towards the expenses of maybe tuition for the school that your child goes to, or some homeschooling that you're doing, and the expenses there. And so, like any bill that gets passed, it then has to be implemented by the agencies, by the executive branch and the agencies that are germane to that law. And so, apparently, there were at least three things that the agency misinterpreted when they saw House Bill 93 become law. They looked at it and said, okay, the law says this and this, and so we need to make sure we're doing this. One of those things actually came up to me, a friend actually a friend of the program. I think she was on our first season of this program, but she's a homeschooling mom, and she reached out to me a few weeks ago, or maybe earlier, whenever it was, it's not really matter. And she asked me, she said, I'm being told that in order to qualify for the tax credit as a homeschooling mom, that I have to get my curriculum all in one spot. And that just doesn't make sense, because not a lot of there's not every homeschooling family just buys one set of curriculum to use for their students. Maybe they piecemeal it. I mean, that's the whole point of having freedom school choice and education choice is the ability to piecemeal the education curriculum from maybe several different sources. And so that was one of the fixes that apparently Representative Monks wanted to do to the parental choice tax credit. So with that, let's take a look at the clip from yesterday. This is Representative Jason Monks in the House Ways and Means Committee presenting a bill to make sure that the agencies do exactly what the legislature intended when they passed this bill. Check it out.
This legislation deals with the school choice bill that we passed last year. Whenever you start implementing something, you recognize some difference of opinion in how legislation was written versus how it's being interpreted, mostly there at the Tax Commission. This has some clarifications there to make sure that the intent of the legislature is being followed as far as what we thought we were doing. Briefly, just a couple of those things. One of them was the age. We wrote in the legislation that you had to be between 5 and 18. The Tax Commission has had some interesting interpretations on that, I would say. For example, if you are a senior and you are 18 throughout your last senior year, and if you turned 19 by December 31st, then that year you would not have qualified, they said, because you weren't 18 at the end of the tax year. Also said, on the other side, we said from 5 to 18, they also said, well, if you are not 5 at the time you are applying, meaning for the following up year, then you don't qualify. So they kind of hit us on both sides and said we couldn't do that, which we thought was an interesting way of interpreting it. So we just changed legislation there. It says at the time of, at any time within the tax year. We had another change to make sure that it allowed people to buy their product, whatever products they were buying for schooling. Didn't have to be from one vendor. It could be from multiple vendors as long as it covered the same subject. They thought that maybe it should only be from one vendor, which was also kind of weird. We're also clarifying where the tax credit can come out of the state refund account. It was implied there, but they kind of thought that it needed to have a better definition, so we just said that it has to come out of there. So that's what these changes do. They're just some clarification cleanups, no substantive changes, no dollar changes, no anything else. It's just cleanup with that. Chairman, look for your support on this.
Yeah, very nice. And as it would be, the bill is going to move forward. So hopefully that gets passed this year, so we can fix up those fixes. It's fascinating, right? Like it almost seems like the tax commission wanted to have like more restrictions on this thing. You know, the agency that's implementing this wanted to have more restrictions on this rather than err on the side of freedom. I mean, you know, to say that no, you can only have one curriculum. You can't piecemeal it out like that. It seems so odd. But thankfully, Representative Monks is taking care of it. So we'll pay attention to that bill as it moves forward. There was obviously that was in the House and Ways Committee, which has leadership from the Republicans and the Democrats. So it's a pretty it's 4-3. There's 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats, and I believe it was Representative Birch who said, it just seems odd that we're cutting all of these different programs, but this one we weren't going to cut, and that seems odd. So I would have liked to have seen that in this bill. Well, sorry, buddy. Okay, moving on. Let's go to this morning now. This morning, House Bill 831 was presented in committee, and this bill. This bill is interesting because it would have, it will tell on election day. There's Raybould in committee. It would tell on election day that if a polling location is happening at a school, that the school would be closed for the day, that there would be no in-person instruction that day at school. Largely, there might be other activities that are going on, but largely there's be no in-person instruction that day at the school if it's a polling location. And the reason for that, the overarching reason for that was for safety reasons, and so this was passed the House, and so now it's over in the Senate. And so Senator Ruckty, the Democrat, had an interesting observation about this, and I thought it was worth noting here to pay attention to and listen, and then we'll have some discussion afterwards on it. Check it out.
Mr. Chairman, so my question wasn't intended to backseat drive or be overly critical. It was really just to find out, I think the question needs to be asked, have we thought about the fact that we're stepping away from having kids see people show up and vote? And I just think that's important that young people see that adults in their communities and in their lives, people they recognize, they know, because they're in their neighborhoods, for example, are showing up and doing their civic duty. And there's in my mind, a lot of value to that. Now, maybe it'll be offset by the fact that now kids will associate voting with something really positive, which is a day off from school. I don't doubt that. I mean, that may be the counterbalance to that. But I just feel like when we're doing something like this, that sort of question needs to be asked. Now, what gives me comfort is that Representative Raybould is on the job. And I know that that's the sort of thing that was probably discussed or was discussed, as she mentioned, and that there was a real effort to find compromise and to consider all these things and then come up with the best solution we have. And of course, Secretary McGrain is in favor of this, which also gives me a lot of comfort. But so it is. Society changes, and that's where we are.
Well, society changes, so we will change along with it. So, I mean, I like the idea that schools were in session or are in session when people show up to vote. I think there is some merit to that idea that we get to see this happening. But there's a lot of nuance to this. I'm sure there was a lot of debate about when using schools in general. On such a wide margin when it expanded into such for such a long time. Brian Allman is back here today for the Friday show. Brian, I know you're a poll worker. You've worked the polls before. Maybe you've done it inside a school or not. But what's your take on the idea that maybe we should just make kids go home again and make the parents find some more reasons to find a babysitter or something to take them out of school for this reason.
Yeah, Senator Ruckty actually brought up something that I think scratches the surface of a much larger discussion about society and how we've started segmenting groups of people away from each other. It used to be that everybody was in the same society together. Schools and churches and other community organizations were overlapping and interactive. His statement made me think of the old the tradition of Passover. If you read the Old Testament of the Bible, that the children were explicitly told that they should take part in it and ask questions. Why are we doing this? Why do we do that? And so that they would learn the tradition of their people. And so it is a good point. Our students now not going to see voting, and we're segmenting them away. You're right. I have been a poll worker for several years, and the last time I did that was last November, and it was at an elementary school in Boise, which already does not have instruction on election days. So there were no students in the school, which as a poll worker, that was kind of convenient. We didn't have to worry about students them being in the way of us and us being in the way of them as we did our business, and they didn't have to worry about missing out on their gym because we were using it for a polling place, at probably their cafeteria as well. In that case, you're right. It is a more complex issue, I think, and maybe it deserves more discussion.
Yeah, well, I mean, it went through the House. It's over in the Senate. Looks like it's going to be before the Senate, and before long, it'll be law. So it's fascinating because I think one of the arguments that was used on the House side too was that there are certain people that aren't supposed to be around children, and we don't want to make sure that they're discouraged from voting. And it just made me think, well, yeah, I mean, there are certain people that are mandated by law that they can't be around children, and sending them to a school on a school day to vote might violate their terms of whatever. And so now it just kind of feels like this is like a pro. I don't know. I don't want to.
That's not too common an issue.
I hope not either. But we, look at any one of those maps.
we do have other options these days. We have early voting. We have mail-in voting.
True.
Personally, I think if I could just snap my fingers, I'd make it so we go back to same day in-person voting, because I think that's the most secure. It's the most, again, go back to what I was saying earlier. It's a civic thing that we used to all participate in. We all take some time on one day to go to the polls and make our voices heard. And now it's spread out. It's, you can do it without ever leaving your house. I mean, in the 21st century, you can live your entire life in just one room, in your one-room studio apartment. You never have to leave. You can vote by mail. You can order DoorDash. You can order Instacart. You can do your job from your home office, as I'm doing here. So I don't know. Maybe it's just another symptom of that breakdown of society. But at the most basic level, I do see the advantage to not having that interaction between the public coming in. You don't know who they are. You don't. There's no vetting. There's less control over who they are, and then you've got the students there. That there are, I'm sure, safety issues that this does address.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep tabs on it, folks. I also just really like the idea of a weekend day voting, where everybody's off or the whole day is a holiday, maybe do it on I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we've ever tried that before. It was something where I did wrote a note to myself a while ago to go back in time and look at the days of the week for elections in our history, but way back when, during the colonial days, to see when they made those votes, if it was like during the workday at the height of crop season, I mean, it's like, well, what are you guys doing, So anyway, all right, there was a bill. Oh no, that wasn't it. What are we doing? Oh, 1300. Yeah. So like I said, folks, we're going to jump around a little bit today, but in the House side today, Senator Doug Econowitz was visiting his old stomping grounds in the House, because he used to be a representative, and he presented a bill today that would take three of the boards and directors and that are normally appointed. If you recall on this show, we're very familiar when a governor appoints somebody to a commission, that it's important to know who that person is, right? And so some of these positions are not appointed by the governor. It's the board that appoints them. So, for example, Fish and Game. There's a board at the Fish and Game, and they appoint their own director. And Senator Okonowitz thinks that it should all be uniform, that it should be appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate, which is the other part of it. So let's watch a little bit of Senator Okonowitz's presentation on this bill. We've got a few clips from this hearing because it's very fascinating, because it's not just about this particular issue, Brian. This is about just kind of like the way government functions as a whole, and where accountability is, and where we can find the power, especially when it comes to somebody like Estela Zamora that we had earlier this year. So let's watch this clip.
For your consideration today, we've got Senate Bill 1300, and what this legislation does is it seeks to appoint and treat the 3 directors for the Idaho Departments of Fish and Game, Parks and Recreation, and Transportation in a fashion that's consistent with our other state agencies. Presently, these 3 directors are hired and serve at the pleasure of their respective boards, and therefore have never been subject to Senate confirmation or gubernatorial appointment. This is important because the current practice is at odds with both the laws and customs of that flow from the Appointments Clause of Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution. In fact, our founders strongly argued the importance of the executive making appointments for cabinet-level positions such as these in tandem with the advice and consent of the Senate. For example, in Federalist 76 and 77, Hamilton asserts that the discernment of an individual in selecting an appointment is superior to a selection by committee, as is currently done by the boards for these 3 agencies in question today. He also argues that it's especially true when the executive nomination is subject to confirmation by the Senate. He says, a well-directed man by a single understanding cannot be distracted and warped by that diversity of views, feelings, and interests, which frequently distract and warp the resolutions of a collective body. He goes on to criticize the idea of a small body selecting appointees for a number of reasons, including the natural desire of people wanting to get along and thereby compromising their selection such that the best person for the job may be set aside in favor of maintaining friendships or in response to internal group intrigues. But most of all, he disliked the backroom nature of the process of appointment by a small group. Excuse me. When compared to the very public nomination by the executive, that's then subject to an independent Senate's public review, public interviews, public debates on that nominee's qualifications prior to making a very public vote, which all result in a meaningful check on the executive as well as a critical and independent second look at a candidate. The founders put great stock in this 2-step and very open public appointment process. The current system we have in place for these three directors not only lacks the benefit of an independent second look at a nominee, it lacks the constitutionally relevant and important check by the legislative branch on the executive as found in that Appointments Clause in Article 2, Section 2. Senate Bill 1300 will simply bring these 3 agency heads properly in line with our other agencies. It'll make the appointment process more rigorous, bring that process out of the shadows and into the public eye, consistent with how we treat our other cabinet level agency heads. The directors will still report to their respective boards, and the boards will retain all of their other current powers, including the power to set budgets, rulemaking, planning roads, setting hunting and fishing seasons, investing in new lands for parks, and so on. We have multiple other agencies like this whose directors and board members are both appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. They include the Department of Education, DEQ, and pardon and paroles, for example. I also think that the structure found in Senate Bill 1300 is going to improve the working relationship between these agencies and the legislature. From time to time, we've experienced frustrations when dealing with what are essentially autonomous agency heads. However, it's important to say that I think those tensions are really not the fault of the directors, the boards, or the members of the legislature, but it's just a natural byproduct of the current ill-designed structure. We've got 3 great directors who I think will work better with the legislature going forward once we correct that structural problem, which has often resulted in agencies encroaching on the legislature's policymaking authority. Now, I have examples of that, but I don't want to take too much time today. I know it's Friday and we're moving along, so I'm going to save that for later in case somebody wants to hear 1 or 2 of those examples. In closing, I know that, like all of you, I've been receiving, or been really inundated with a lot of emails and phone calls claiming that passage of Senate Bill 1300 will result in a breach of the Harriman Park Agreement. And that's just not true. Multiple analyses from different attorneys in the Attorney General's office, as well as Legislative Council, all agree that the changes in this bill will have absolutely no effect on that agreement. Last week, I emailed all of you a copy of the most recent analysis that was authored by Elizabeth Bowen, who, as you all know, is the Idaho legislature's independent and nonpartisan attorney. After an immense amount of legal research, she concluded that Senate Bill 1300 simply doesn't violate the Harriman Agreement. Her findings are consistent with all of the AG office's earlier work. You can see her conclusions for yourselves in the hard copy that's been provided for you today. And in the conclusion on the last page, she says, there's no inherent conflict between the provisions of SB 1300 and the instruments that conveyed Harriman State Park to the state of Idaho. While the instruments provided selection criteria for Park Service personnel, the instruments did not specify a selection process or a selection authority. What matters for the purposes of the conveyance instruments is not who selects Park Service personnel or the process by which they are selected, but whether they are selected on the basis of merit. As long as the director of the Department of Parks and Rec is appointed based on merit, the state has complied with the conveyance instruments. Lastly, the constitutionally supported approach of gubernatorial appointment and Senate confirmation will not only make the appointment process more open to the public than it currently is, it will also provide two separate and independent looks at a nominee, making it much less likely that a director appointed to Parks and Recreation would be someone who could potentially violate the Harriman Agreement as compared to how that appointment is presently handled, which is, as you know, by a single entity, absent the all-important second step of Senate review and confirmation. And with that, I'm happy to stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So Doug presenting that bill there. Brian, there's two things here that I want to parse out here. One is this agreement here with this special land that was donated to the state. We're going to get into a clip from somebody who's taking the opposite position on that. But just in general here, I mean, we're talking about making it uniform, right? These gubernatorial appointments.
Right. That seems to be the overall thrust of the bill. I saw Idaho Freedom Foundation's rating of it. They gave it a +1 because they believe it supports the spirit of the U.S. Constitution and the separation of powers. And it was interesting during debate that I was listening to this morning, some of the opponents of this bill actually brought up separation of powers. But I think there's this sense, especially with more progressive people in politics, that the powers are the legislative, the judicial, the executive, and the bureaucracy, as if the bureaucracy is its own power, its own branch of government. But that's not the case. The bureaucracy is and always was meant to be subject to the executive. And we see that at the national level when President Trump is trying to exercise his authority as our elected chief executive over his branch of government. And they try to stop him in courts, and the bureaucracy fights back against it. So I'm still researching this. I'm going to have something out on the Gem State Chronicle hopefully later today as I continue to dig into it. But it seems like a good idea to move the appointment power of these directors of these three agencies from the board, which, as people pointed out in debate, the boards are appointed by the governor as well. So this is actually just taking out a layer and saying that the governor can appoint that director because remember, the governor is the elected chief executive of our state. We, the voters, go to the polls every 4 years. We're going to do it here in May in the primary and then again in November for the general election to decide who is our chief executive. We don't go to the polls and elect directors. We don't go to the polls and elect members of these boards. We elect the governor. Whether you like the governor or not, that's immaterial. He is our representative as the chief executive. And so allowing him to be the decision maker as to who gets to be the director of these agencies makes a lot more sense and fits in with the democratic principles of our Republican system of government rather than outsourcing that to unelected boards. You brought up Estela Zamora earlier. The governor has the right and the power to appoint the members of the Idaho Human Rights Commission. And that meant that when he was going to reappoint somebody who had some problems that citizens had problems with, we were able to talk to the governor and talk to the Senate, which gives the advice and consent on these appointments, and exercise our ability as voters and constituents to influence our elected officials. In the case of a board appointing someone, they don't have to worry about the voters. They don't have to go before the voters. And so they're more insulated. Now, you might say that's a good thing because it takes those things away from the political process. But, well, I'm not sure that's the case because as we hear, everything is political.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. So, all right. Well, then just in all fairness and to hear the other side of this, let's listen to one of the testifiers who testified remotely today in committee. Let's watch this.
Sorry for the delay.
You're fine, Charlie. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Charlie Lanch. I'm a resident of Island Park, Idaho, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president of Friends of Harriman State Park, for which of the past 15 years has supported the park through fundraising and volunteer efforts. Friends of Harriman State Park opposes Senate Bill 1300 for 4 key reasons. First, it was clearly the intent of the Harriman family to minimize political influence over the management of the railroad ranch. That intent is reflected in the current director selection process established by the Idaho legislature and has worked for over 60 years. Second, there's a significant legal debate over whether partisan officials can select the IDPR director based on merit alone. Our legal counsel, Kathy Silek with Hawley and Troxel, disagrees with an opinion rendered by Legislative Services, and this conflict is likely to lead to costly litigation if it becomes law. Third, there's an important distinction between directors serving at the pleasure of the governor and one serving under independent board. The current non-political appointee structure has allowed directors to serve across multiple gubernatorial administrations of both parties, fostering stability and constructive relationships with both urban and rural leaders and federal land management agencies statewide. Finally, this proposal isn't new. This has come up in 2009, 2018, and as early as last year and been defeated. And in closing, let me say this. In 1965, the legislator created IDPR and the Parks and Recreation Board in a manner that respected the Harriman's family wishes. Their extraordinary gift has benefited all Idahoans, and it is in the state's interest to honor those terms. Let me be clear. Forcing the Idaho Department of Recreation to serve at the pleasure of a governor risks the loss of the state's integrity and the park itself. And with that, I would urge, members of the committee to please not advance State Bill 13 in its current form.
Okay,
And
thank you, Charlie. Charlie, I have Representative Scott has a question for you. Would you yield to a question?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Charlie. I thought I heard testimony about preserving hunting and fishing, but I just was researching online. It says there's no hunting and trapping are generally allowed at Harriman State Park. Is that correct?
That is correct. The state park is also a designated wildlife refuge, and it supports. It's a vibrant habitat for migratory ungulates, for grizzly bear, for elk, deer, swans. It's a wildlife refuge and a state park, and there is no hunting allowed in Harriman. It's surrounded by public lands that do allow hunting, and it actually produces a lot of big game opportunities for hunters out around the park. But inside the park, there's no hunting. It's a wildlife refuge.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right, so there's some of the defense on that side, and I guess when Representative Hawes asked the question for Doug Econowitz, what problem is this solving? It kind of goes into a bit of refuting some of the things that were said there. So let's watch this clip, this exchange here.
And sitting here listening to the testimony and listening to your opening remarks and what you've just said now, and the question rattling around in my head is, what problem are we trying to solve? I heard you just say we don't like the autonomous functioning. Is that the problem?
Senator Econowitz.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hawes, I would say, I'll give you an example, and I've got others, but I'll give you an example. When I was newly elected, I was a member of the House of Representatives, and I sat on the Resources Committee. At that time, Idaho was the last state in the union to have not legalized lighted knocks and expanding broadheads. Now, that has to do with bow hunting. The knock is the part that goes on the string. It's the little U-shaped deal. Technology exists for those to be powered by a small battery and be lit with an LED bulb so that you can find your arrow more easily. Expanding broadheads do what the name suggests. They expand on impact. Well, members of the legislature had been asking Fish and Game to incorporate that rule. By rule, add this hunting tool. And Fish and Game refused. So that's an example of sort of extending their policy making, extending into our policy making area. It's the beginnings of that. We make policy, we set policy, they implement. And by not doing that, it was going to the first step into ranging into our policymaking territory. Then Representative Mitchell brought a bill to make it law that Idaho would allow lighted knocks and expanding broadheads. The agency came to our committee hearing and fought tooth and nail to try and stop that bill from passing. Again, we're just doing our job. We're making policy. We're listening to our constituents. We're the last state in the union that doesn't have that. They're coming in saying, we don't want you to do it. They had some arguments as to why. But at the end, when they, I think, realized that they were losing the committee, the deputy director at the time said, at the end of the day, we don't think this is a decision that properly lies with you. We think it more properly lies with us. I was a brand new representative, and I found that to be, well, somewhat offensive and very wrong. We set policy, they implement. So that is an example of encroaching, in my view, on policymaking. And I think that happens with these three agencies more than with the others. And I have sat on the germane committees for those three agencies ever since I was first elected. So I know I'm not alone in that because I've talked to lots of people who've experienced similar things. But that's an example of the problem, one of the problems that I think will be fixed. I think they will work more closely with the legislature. And when they see something like that, maybe consider a little bit more about, okay, let's put it into rule instead of having to have it sort of forced upon them by law.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you. So what and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard you just say is that you want the officer of the governor and this body to be able to exert more influence on the director through the political appointment process so that we can change policy more quickly rather than having it exist now where this board that, by the way, is appointed by the governor and then confirmed by the Senate appoint the director and then determine whether the director is doing a good job. So I don't see any change in like the actual structure of what just happened in terms of that example that you gave me changing. It's just that the governor now gets to appoint the director and exert potentially more influence so that things change more quickly when we want them to. Is that what you're saying?
Senator O'Conowitz.
Chairman Crane, Representative Hawes, what I'm saying is that the system that the founders envisioned and that we employ for the vast majority of our agencies works extremely well. I would like these three agencies to function under a similar umbrella.
Well, fair enough argument there, I would say, don't you, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying earlier, this is the system of our country and our state. And you've got these three agencies that, for various reasons, as I'm learning, are operating slightly outside of that. I do think it's worth pointing out that one of the reasons that the Democrats are probably opposing this so strongly is because the boards of these three agencies, by statute, must have an equal or close to equal number of Republicans and Democrats. So even in a supermajority red state, these are areas where Democrats have, I would say, outsized influence, both in the operation of these agencies and also in the hiring and firing of directors. So I don't know if you want to go further into that, but then this. Well, I think is interesting as well.
It is interesting, and it goes to the aspect of like what is the makeup of the population, just like as you're saying, is this majority Republican or conservative state, and neither party has a monopoly on the stewardship of our lands. In fact, I would say that that conservatives, especially those in this state and in this part of our country, Wyoming, Montana, and so forth, know the value of making sure that we are good stewards of our public lands and our wetlands and all sorts of outdoors, areas. I mean, that's just it. It goes to everything from being able to use the land and hunt on the land and so forth, and deliver a good quality of life. So, and it's not just about like anti-humans can never go, and never invade these spaces. It's about utilizing the land that God gave us. And so let's go over to Joe Alfieri, because he had a great comment. I don't want to steal his thunder, and then we can comment on that. So let's watch Representative Alfieri react to what he's seeing play out here as well.
The argument we're having here clearly, I think, comes down to that this is not supposed to be a political process. But let's be realistic, folks. Everything is a political process. Who says that this board is not now, any of these boards are not now acting in a political fashion in choosing who the leadership is? I think what we're looking at here is whether the process is going to be a hidden process where the board makes a decision with no public review, or if it's going to be an open process to select these directors. And that is what this bill is about. It is about openness. It is about legislature, which is responsible to the people, getting to review what happens and making that final decision as to who runs that agency. Simple as that.
It is. Everything's political, Brian.
Right. This really is a very long-standing debate in our country, going back, I would say, to Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. As society became more complex and government became more complex, you started to get this idea from the people working in government, not the elected officials, but the bureaucrats, that, well, the political process is murky and choppy, and people get elected not because of their merit, but because they're good campaigners, and they're fickle. The people are fickle. What we need is a steady hand guiding the government through all the tossing to and fro of the political system. And so we need these, executive bureaucrats, these agency heads and the people they hire to be non-political. And they stay whether you get a Democrat in office or a Republican in office, the bureaucracy stays the same. And as we've seen over the years, that's become a huge problem because, like I said, the bureaucracy has become this fourth branch of government. And I would say it's more of a left-wing thing than a right-wing thing, but there's some, I think, Republicans who give it too much credence as well. That it's like Senator Conowitz said. He comes in there, and you have this bureaucratic agency saying, "This isn't your call to make. This is our call." But the problem is those people are not elected by the people. They are not accountable to the people, and that is the very basis of our Republican form of government that our founders created.
Absolutely, and they always tend to err on the side of more control and less freedom and less autonomy for the individual, which is what we are all about advocating for. All right, well, the bill did pass committee, and so it'll continue its debate as it heads over to the House floor, and we'll see where this lands. But it's a good discussion to have.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, assuming this passes the House floor. When it comes to the governor, he's going to be faced on the one hand with this bill that actually increases his power, but on the other hand, there's a very strong lobbyist working against it. Just in a few minutes of research here, a lot of news articles, a lot of press releases, a lot of organizations like that Friends of Harriman Park are really opposed to this. So he's going to be hearing it from them as well. So
which should be a sign to you. Remember, every time you think you're just doing something to make something uniform, and then all of a sudden they start coming out of the woodwork, and they're like, no, don't mess with this. Don't mess with this. That is a huge tell, folks. That is a huge tell. And so we definitely have to take note of that. So I'm glad you pointed that out, Brian, because if the media is getting involved in this, then this might be a good thing after all. Folks, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back after this with some more analysis, some more look on the day. Brian Allman will stay with us, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government and what we were tasked to do.
The dictionary defines a pledge as something that you give as a sign that you'll keep a promise. As Idahoans, that's what we're looking for in our elected leaders. A sign that they'll keep their word. Talk is cheap, and so are political promises, hidden agendas, and special interests. This is why we created the Citizens Alliance of Idaho Pledge, affirming the values Idahoans have been living by for over 100 years, inspired by the only two documents everyone has agreed to live by. So when an Idaho legislator signs our pledge, inviting voters to publicly hold them accountable, that's what we call political integrity. The pledge restores trust and honesty between voters and their legislators. It means protecting our shared values and ensuring your voice is heard in Boise. And that is priceless. Thank your legislator for having the political courage to sign the Citizens Alliance of Idaho pledge. And if they haven't, it's time to ask why.
Okay, well, no, we're gonna give you 30 days. We're gonna do
Here
it in 30 days.
to the Senate here, Senator Brian Lenny debating House Bill 542, which is the social media addictive, stop harms from addictive social media, and we'll sit with this for a little bit and listen to the argument here from Senator Lenny.
So that's not just billion-dollar companies. That's ones who have made over $1 billion in advertising. So that's a pretty small group there. So under this bill, Discord blocks. There's a lot of abuse that happens on Discord with teenagers, but Discord doesn't make $1 billion in ad revenue. So all the kids going through stuff on Discord, this bill does nothing to protect them. Nothing. Somebody mentioned roadblocks in here earlier. Texas Attorney General Paxton called that a digital playground for pixel pedophiles. This bill does nothing to protect kids on roadblocks. And we could do this all day, just company after company after company. It's going to help some kids, probably. It's going to protect some kids, but this is not going to protect all kids. Let me wrap this up here, Mr. President. With all that said, this might kind of sound funny, but I could go on. I've talked to a lot of you about this bill on reasons I'm against it and reasons I know it's not going to actually work. But I really can't blame you if you vote for it. Because if $1 billion organization that's harming our kids hired 5 lobbyists to go to our building and try to kill this bill, that says something. There's something there. There's something there. So I'm a no, but I want to be clear. I've been against these types of bills, App Store Accountability Act, stuff like that. I've been against these from day one for about 4 years since I've been in the legislature. But my reasons for being against this bill and Meta's reasons are completely different. They're lobbying for something weaker. I'm pushing for something stronger. So whether this passes or not, let's come back next year and go harder. Let's make them actually liable for what the algorithm does. Let's close the loopholes. Let's shore things up. The bill sponsor worked really hard on this, and she's obviously very passionate about it. And again, I don't doubt anyone in this room wants to protect children. I just don't think this bill gets us there. And if you want to vote yes because Meta is lobbying against it, I get that. I won't blame you. But I'm a no because I think Idaho kids deserve a bill that actually kneecaps these companies that are hurting our kids. And I don't think this one quite gets us there, Mr. President. So with that, I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Senator Blaylock.
Thank you, Mr. President. This was one of those bills that you really want to support it. And I really do. I thought I would be an easy yes on this, but as I've done my due diligence, I've kind of come full circle, I feel like. I read a book a few months ago called Stolen Focus, and it's all about social media and specifically how it affects our brains and how our brains just aren't wired to resist the dopamine-driven social media the way that they've set it up. Even with the most, self-disciplined person, it really is almost impossible. And these companies have just perfected on how to steal our time and our focus. And when I was reading this bill, a lot of the solutions in this bill are solutions that at the end of that book that is a recommendation of things that should happen.
All right, folks, this debate is going to continue in the Senate for a while here, so we'll keep tabs on it. If we're still on the air while they go to the vote, we'll let you know how it goes. And we'll probably isolate this debate and throw it up online so you can watch it in full from top to bottom. We did that recently with a hearing. Actually, it was the floor debate on the I'm forgetting what it was now. But if you go to our YouTube channel, our Rumble channel, you can find all sorts of great clips and segments there that we don't air on the program. That's the beauty of having this stuff online, is we can isolate things and have it out there. So I definitely encourage you to do it. Look at this quick plug to go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe over there, or on Rumble as well. Brian, let's bring Brian back in here. I want to talk about JFAC real quick, because this morning in JFAC, the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, Senator Groh had a few comments to make about the budget process and wanting knowing that there is still policy out there that might affect the budget, that they're getting near the end of the session here, and so they have to do some work. They have to get these budgets out and being voted upon, even if there's certain policy changes that might come down the pike. And then Representative Tanner, the co-chair, jumped in a little bit and had his remarks kind of admonishing the committees. Let's take a look at this real quick.
To get into that detail, let me just make a comment. Here in JFAC, we have the ability to make policy. We don't like to do that. We always have the hope that policy decisions and budgets are made in what we call the germane committees, the policy setting committees. And we've had some efforts back and forth. We're talking education today, obviously. We've had some efforts and still some ongoing efforts in the education committees. But we're getting near the end, we hope, of the session. And that effort, we're being a little preemptive here in that we're going to set some budgets based on what we hope policy will be. And whatever the policy happens to be, these will be the dollars that are set relative to the policy that comes out from those committees. So I just make that comment. Co-Chair Tanner, anything you'd like to add to that, or does that kind of lay the groundwork?
I think you stated it. It is frustrating that the germane committees were unable to act on anything. I know that both Senator Groh and myself both went to the germane committees and spoke to almost every single germane committee that we have and expressed to them the type of situation we're in from a budgeting standpoint, what they needed to address, what we hoped that they could address within the germane committees, not just on some of the things we're dealing with, but on other issues whatsoever. They've been passing stuff for the last 10, 15 years, policy that have actually added cost to this budget. And they get so frustrated when we come to the floor and they state that the budget's growing and that they have issues with that. And then we turn around and it's because of the policies that are passed that are driving this cost up. And this is something that they need to address. And it is frustrating that we end up kind of getting our hands tied to make sure that we are the only constitutional requirement for us to be down here to balance this budget out, and that they lack the, I wouldn't want to say fortitude at this point in time, but they're lacking something to actually get the policies done in those committees that can actually help structure the budget so we can actually get out of here. So I'll leave it at that. I probably shouldn't have said anything.
Mr. Chair.
All right, let's pause this real quick, Brian. Great points here. They talk about they can set policy in those two committees, the Senate Finance Committee, the House Appropriations Committee. They can set policy and run germane things through there, especially when they're talking about money. But they want to let the actual committees themselves do it, not them take care of it. But and then Tanner points out, look, you guys, you balk at the budget bills that come in and say, oh, they're growing, but you're not running policy that limits it. That's basically what I'm picking up here.
Right. Yeah. The legislative process is complicated and compressed in 3 months. Every year they have to come together and then create a balanced budget. That's their constitutional duty, and that's what JFAC does. It goes through the maintenance budgets and then the enhancement budgets. There's in the end there will be over 100 budget bills, I think. And each of those is, deciding how much money are we going to put here, how much are we going to put there. But that's all based on the policy passed not only by the legislature this year, but over many years past. Whatever the law is, whatever the law says, that has to be funded. And so you've got the germane committees passing policy, and a lot of times that policy spends money. But then that requires JFAC to then go back and appropriate that money. And so it's a balancing act both ways. When we're in good years where we have so much extra revenue because of growth and high taxes and high revenues and a great economy, that's easy because the policy committees will just pass stuff. And of course we can pay for it. We can even afford to cut taxes while paying for it. And JFAC just says, okay, here's the money. But then in a year like this, where it's a very tight budget, every time JFAC goes to try to think they have it balanced, then a policy committee comes and makes some changes over there, or JFAC knows they have to wait for some policy committees to do things. It is very complex, and it requires a lot of coordination, which is, as we know in politics, with herding cats, it's not always easy.
Absolutely, totally agree. And there's also a lot of things that can happen, not just at the state level, but at the local level. And we don't have time to play the clip, but Senator Wintrow was complaining about how, like, oh yes, you're right, we do make policy here, and this is where we think up of new programs and new things to fund, and we have to send money. Well, sometimes the cities and the counties can find their own cash. This is what happened at the town hall in Kootenai County in January. Listen to this clip.
I do want to say our treasurer's office does a phenomenal job in investing, and they're the reasons why we are able to do a lot of these capital projects. So I really give kudos to the treasurer's office. Last year alone, based on how they invested their money, they brought in $6.9 million in interest. So you have an incredible treasurer's office.
Yeah, Brian. That was Jennifer Locke talking about how much money they brought in, and the coroner here stating that they used that money to build a new autopsy center that's going up. So a lot of good things out there, Brian. Where can people follow you, my friend, as we cut out of here?
GemStateChronicle.com. I'm going to go a lot deeper into this, Senate Bill 1300 issue.
Yeah, excellent. All right, we'll see you all there. Folks, it's Friday. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back here on Monday. Be sure to give us a call. Leave your message, 208-402-4915, to leave your voice message. We'll play it all across Idaho. And we still need you to contact everybody. Just contact them all. Get their business going.
I think it puts a stake in the ground that says we have a sovereign right to protect what's ours.